The envelope came in on a Thursday, cream-colored cursive script on the front. A little too elegant for something meant for me. I turned it over in my hands for a second before I opened it. Inside, there it was, a wedding anniversary invitation. 25 years for my father and his second wife, Carla. Big event. Country club, family. 150 names, probably more. Mine wasn't one of them. Not really. The envelope said, Mr. A. Grimy. Grimy. I stared at it for a while. Let the sound of it sink in. Grimy. No call. No complaint. I slid it into the top drawer of my desk, under a folder of unpaid vendor invoices. Maybe it was a typo. Or maybe they finally decided I didn't need to belong anymore. I didn't cry. Just sat there for a minute, wondering if my name would have been spelled right if I were sending a check. I didn't say yes right away. For a few days, I kept the envelope closed. Just let it sit there like an old grocery list you don't want to throw away yet. I went about work as usual, calls with my team in Houston, updated shipping rates, routing corrections, but the back of my mind kept circling the question, should I go? Last time I saw my father was at a funeral. He introduced me to the pastor as the business one, not his daughter, not even my daughter, just the business one. I called Aunt June. She's always been the anchor in the storm. I asked her what she thought. Don't go for them, she said. Go for yourself. Show up because you exist. That's enough. That night, I booked a hotel 2 miles from the venue. Nothing fancy. I didn't ask to stay with family. I didn't want to play house. And I didn't tell anyone I was coming. If they didn't think I was real enough to spell my name right, they didn't need a heads up. 3 days before the event, Carla sent a message. Group text, full of politeness and southern sugar. Just a reminder, the vibe is light and casual, no formal attire. We wouldn't want anyone to feel out of place. Translation, don't bring your uniform. Don't wear your medals. Don't make us look small next to you. I took a screenshot. Didn't reply. That uniform has been with me through hell and heat. Iraq, Syria, the back halls of D.C., negotiations, 2 stars on the collar, 34 years of showing up. But apparently it was too much for a country club brunch with family. I hung it back in the closet, picked a navy blue dress instead. Simple, safe. One that made people's eyes slide over me instead of stop. They don't mind my money, don't mind the contractors I send, don't mind the budget reviews I help them with. But me? My full presence? That's too loud. I packed the night before. Plain makeup, low heels. Nothing that said command. Nothing that said, don't mess with me. Just enough to blend in, not enough to stand out. Before I zipped my bag, I looked at the folded flag in the glass case on my bookshelf. My mother's. She served before me, left us too soon, but she raised me with eyes that didn't blink under pressure. She used to say, you can't force people to see your worth, but you can refuse to shrink. I stopped at a gas station halfway to Savannah, grabbed a black coffee that tasted like cardboard, and a protein bar that fought back when I bit it. On the road, I watched families driving to the beach, kids pressing faces against the window, sun hats flapping in the back seat. I wasn't built for beach days, but I was built to endure. I glanced at the invitation again on the passenger seat, still said grimy. And I thought, funny, I manage operations across 6 states, but I still don't know where I sit at a family table. Checked into the hotel around 4:30 p.m. Room smelled like lemon wipes and overuse. I ironed my dress, slid into it like muscle memory. No jewelry. Just a plain watch and quiet shoes. The venue was 10 minutes away. Savannah Oaks Country Club, pale blue banners, gold accents, floral arrangements from someone's Pinterest board. I pulled up. No valet walked over. No, glad you're here. No, you look great. Just the event manager scanning a clipboard, glancing up like I was asking for directions to the restroom. I gave my name. She blinked. Let me check again. You're not on the primary guest list, but you're welcome to go in. Carla spotted me from across the entryway. Her eyes widened just enough. Oh, you made it, she chirped, wrapping me in a light, cold hug. We didn't know if you'd feel comfortable coming. Translation, we hoped you wouldn't. I smiled, didn't show teeth. She led me past 3 decorated tables, through a crowd of clinking glasses and soft jazz. My seat? Near the back. Next to the speakers. Far from the main stage. The place where names don't get announced. I poured myself a glass of wine from a shared pitcher. It tasted like lukewarm regret. No one looked back to see I'd arrived. And no one said my name. No one noticed when I walked in. Not even a glance. The room was filled with polite clinks of forks and glasses, laughter that didn't quite reach the corners, and faces I hadn't seen in years. People I'd grown up with, cousins, step-uncles, family friends, stood in tight circles, smiling at each other like they were still in church. I scanned the space, not for a familiar face, but for a chair. Any chair. The decor hadn't changed in decades. Overdone, pastel everything, gold-trimmed photo boards, lace runners on every table. It was their idea of Southern elegance, the kind where legacy mattered more than accuracy. The front rows were filled with framed names, placeholders that meant, "You still belong here." My name wasn't one of them. I found my seat in the back, not tucked away, but flanked by 2 black speakers that buzzed just enough to make sure no one could talk over them. I smiled. Someone had gone out of their way to make sure I stayed unseen and unheard. A few cousins passed by on the way to refill their drinks. They offered the kind of smile you give someone you think might be a +1, or a last-minute addition, a vague nod, a non-committal half-welcome. I nodded back, not because I needed to, but because old habits take longer to die in the South. Carla walked by a few minutes later, her hand landing on my shoulder like she was checking if I was warm. "You found your table! Good, good," she chirped before drifting off toward the head table like a leaf caught in an air vent. That was the tone of the evening. Nice, just nice enough to keep your mouth shut. A woman I hadn't seen in years, second cousin of my father, maybe, stopped in front of me with a friendly smile. "Are you helping with the event?" she asked, genuinely curious. I held her gaze and said, "I'm attending." She blinked, unsure how to recover, then patted my shoulder like I was a kid at a graduation ceremony and walked off. When people don't know where to place you, I thought, they shrink you until you fit. I looked around again. Not one person had asked how I was. Not one person had said, "Glad you're here." It didn't make me angry. It made things clear. The MC stepped up to the mic. He looked like a retired football coach and read off a printed sheet with the stiffness of someone trying to pronounce names at a spelling bee. The Hartleys, the Atwoods, the Wilksons. Applause followed each one. And we're also so grateful to Marissa Grimes, always elegant, always supportive. I didn't move. Carla clapped, too fast, too loud, and waved vaguely in my direction. "She's right there," she said, laughing as if this was some harmless mix-up. No one looked at me long enough to realize that wasn't my name. No one corrected it. I kept drinking. The wine was flat, but it gave me something to do with my hands. They never forget to list me, I thought. They just forget who I am. I had been misnamed before. Emails, voicemails, place cards. But hearing it over a microphone, with applause after, made something settle deep in my chest. Not pain, not even anger, just confirmation. From my spot near the speakers, I had a perfect view of the head table. Carla had both hands on Lucas's arm, smiling like she'd just announced his engagement. Richard leaned in, said something to him, and laughed. Lucas smiled back, then looked at me. Just for a second. Then looked down at his plate. That 1-second glance told me everything. He knew I saw it, and he didn't want to be responsible for it. I remembered what my mother used to say when people erased her from things without making a sound. "You don't get erased in one day," she told me. "You get erased inch by people who smile while doing it." I reached for my water, my fingers steady. Thought about getting up and leaving. But I stayed. Not because I thought they'd notice, but because I needed to remember this feeling. I needed to stay long enough to make sure I never forgot how it felt to be invisible with everyone watching. My phone buzzed. A reminder. Lucas budget approval deadline. That one got me. I laughed. Quiet. Bitter. Even here, Surrounded by seafood platters and crystal glassware, I was still the one who kept the wheels moving. I glanced at the window. Outside, the sun was starting to fall behind the trees. Just past the edge of the reflection, I saw it, the garment bag, still in the back seat of my car, still untouched. I had brought my uniform, folded, pressed. Not for them. I didn't know why I brought it until that moment. If you're going to stand alone, I told myself, you may as well stand tall. I poured myself another glass of water, held it up like a silent toast. No one watched, no one clinked back. And that, oddly enough, made the moment mine. The lights dimmed just as I took a sip of my wine. Someone clinked a spoon against a glass. Then on cue, a screen lowered above the stage, and a soft instrumental track faded in. Words appeared in gold cursive, "Our journey as one." I leaned back in my chair, bracing myself for whatever was coming. Carla stood beside the mic, her voice syrupy sweet as she welcomed everyone to enjoy a little look back at our family's path. The crowd responded the way Southern crowds always do. Applause first, emotions second. Glasses clinked, people chuckled in anticipation. The video began. Images of Richard and Carla, arm in arm at banquets, at beach homes, christenings. Then scenes from gatherings I remembered funding, the catering bills, the logistics. I wasn't invited to those. But my father's face showed up in every clip, arms around Carla, or Lucas, or some distant cousin smiling like they'd all built something together. Then came the Lucas montage. Kindergarten play. First soccer goal, military graduation, cut to more handshakes, framed plaques. It was clean, curated. He looked like the golden boy of a legacy I'd never been offered. And then, it got worse. A shot of the backyard from Richard's 50th. I remember that day. I paid for every damn decoration on those tables. I stood next to him in that photo. But the video? It showed him, Carla, Lucas, and the frame conveniently cut just before I would have appeared. That was such a good year, someone whispered behind me. I didn't turn around, just stared at the screen and let my eyes go out of focus. I was there, I thought. But apparently, history has its editors. Mom used to tell me something I didn't fully understand until now. People don't always erase you out of hatred, she'd said. Sometimes they erase you out of convenience. I didn't cry, didn't move. I studied my stillness like I was waiting for it to give me permission to feel something. But there was no shock. No sting. Just a dull understanding, like looking at a light bulb you already knew was burnt out. They'd been fading me out for years. Slowly, carefully. I just hadn't realized how well it worked. I gripped my water glass, not out of anger, just to feel something solid. The video kept going. By the time the final slideshow faded out and the lights returned, I'd already made up my mind. I stood, quietly. Not a single head turned. I walked toward the side entrance, moved through the hallway past the bathrooms, and pushed open the door to the back patio. The evening air was cooler now. A breeze tugged at the hem of my dress. The sky had gone dark. Somewhere in the trees, a cicada kept buzzing like it didn't know the show was over. I leaned on the railing, not angry, not even disappointed, just outside. I pulled out my phone, opened my gallery, and scrolled until I found the original photo, the one from Richard's birthday. There I was, standing next to him, smiling. Holding the damn cake, the one they'd shown tonight had cropped me out completely. I took a screenshot, sent it to Aunt June with one line. They remember what they want. I remember the truth. After a moment, she texted back. That's all you need. I waited another few minutes, then turned back toward the door. When I re-entered, the slideshow had ended. Carla was back at the mic, glowing like she'd just won something. She gestured to Lucas, who stood near the head table. Let's welcome the one who carries our future forward, she said. People clapped, forks clinked, and Lucas stepped up. As he walked past, his eyes caught mine. Just for a beat. I didn't look away. I didn't smile. I'm not here to be seen, I told myself. I'm here to watch them perform what they think is legacy. And in that moment, something settled. This wasn't a misunderstanding. It wasn't neglect. It was a rewrite. and I was no longer part of the draft. Carla's voice rang out just as the last spoon clinked against a dessert plate. "And now," she said with that same rehearsed warmth she used for cameras and in-laws, "it's time to hear from the man who's carrying our family legacy forward." She placed her hand on Lucas's back like she was presenting a prize bull. I knew that tone. I'd heard it in boardrooms, church halls, and fundraisers. It was the kind of tone you used to wrap a story with a bow, even if the story was borrowed. Lucas stepped to the mic. Guests clapped with eager, unbothered hands. Carla clasped Richard's arm, eyes dewy like she'd seen God. The DJ lowered the background jazz. Lucas began to speak, and I froze. I knew every word, not because it was predictable, because I'd written it, months ago, for a corporate keynote, for a man who had nothing to say but needed to look like he did. Even the cadence, pause here, soften tone here, land hard on the last line. I had built that rhythm, every breath of it. "Legacy is built not in noise," he said, "but in quiet consistency." They applauded like he'd carved it from stone. I didn't move, didn't blink. Inside, something twisted, not in shock, but in recognition. They ghosted me from the photos, I thought. Now they're ventriloquizing my mind. Only June looked uncomfortable. She caught my eye, held it, said nothing. The rest of the room drank it up like communion wine. The screen lit up again. Highlights of Lucas's contributions. A reel began. Corporate events, new trucks rolling out of depots, diagrams of routing systems I had spent years perfecting. Lucas walking through one of our warehouses with a clipboard, posed, polished. Carla's voice narrated over the footage. All made possible by Lucas's visionary leadership and guidance. His strategic foresight has ensured growth and stability for the Grimes network. The word network echoed, like they'd turned my life into a brand pitch. My jaw didn't tighten. My hands didn't shake, but I did grip my water glass with both palms like it might remind me I still existed. I gave them blueprints, I thought, and they printed someone else's name on the building. Guests stood to applaud, the kind of standing ovation that wasn't earned, just timed right. Carla mouthed across the table, "I'm so proud," as if she hadn't pre-approved the whole thing. Richard reached out and squeezed Lucas's shoulder with a kind of pride I'd never seen on his face. I remembered signing my first solo contract, back in a strip mall office with no air conditioning. There'd been no applause then, no cameras, just me and a pen, praying the ink wouldn't run out. No one clapped when I kept us solvent in 2008, I thought. But claps are cheap when the script is perfect. The DJ came back in with a soft instrumental. Laughter returned. The air rebalanced, but something had cracked. I stood from my seat slowly, told the table I was heading to the restroom. Instead, I slipped out the side door again, out into the dusk. It was quieter now. Fewer guests lingered outside. I walked until I found myself by the banquet hall's glass windows. My reflection stared back. Dress slightly wrinkled, eyes older than I remembered this morning. If I leave now, I thought, they win. They finalize their version of the story. I stood there for a while, watching my breath fog the glass. A single tear tracked down, uninvited. Not from sadness, from fatigue. I didn't walk to my car. I didn't pack up my name. I walked back inside, still silent, still mine. Carla saw me re-enter. She looked over, not smug, dismissive. The way you look at a tree branch that didn't break after a storm. Lucas had taken his seat again, now surrounded by cousins asking him questions about business he barely understood. June leaned in from the side, whispered, "You see it, don't you?" I didn't turn my head. "They handed him the throne," I said. "But he doesn't know it's a cardboard crown." And I decided something right then. I wasn't going to correct them, not yet. Let them act, let them perform. But this script, it has an expiration date. By the time dessert had been cleared, the room had softened. People leaned into their chairs with loosened ties and open jackets, wine glasses half empty, voices louder. The kind of comfort that makes people honest or careless, sometimes both. Richard stood. He didn't tap a glass. He didn't need to. The room quieted the moment he raised his hand, Carla rose with him, practically glowing. She pressed one hand to his back and the other toward Lucas, smiling like she was about to present the key to the city. "Family," Richard began, "is what survives hardship." That line alone made my skin prickle. It sounded like a toast, but the tone didn't lift, it dug. He continued, looking straight ahead. "Some people survive it by leaving. Some never really stayed. And some of us, we built something real." Laughter. Soft, nervous. A few guests chuckled, not sure if they were supposed to. But some eyes found their way to my table. Quick glances, then back down to their plates. I didn't react. My spine stayed straight. My hands stayed folded in my lap. But my stomach, tight as a knot you can't undo in the dark. Carla added her signature sweetness, a thin glaze over acid. "We all heal in different ways," she said gently, looking nowhere and everywhere at once. "Some with distance, some with service." The message landed. My years away, my military career, my silence, all reframed in one sentence as abandonment. June shifted beside me. I could feel her embarrassment without looking at her. Not for herself, for me. They didn't need to call me a disappointment, I thought. They just framed my dignity as a defect. Dinner resumed like nothing had happened. Plates reappeared. Waiters moved with the precision of people trying to disappear. Mine never came. I waited 5 minutes. 10. I finally flagged a server and asked about the vegetarian plate I had clearly selected on the RSVP. He disappeared into the kitchen, returned with a half apology. "Sorry, ma'am. Looks like no one marked that down." Carla leaned slightly over the back of her chair. "Oh dear," she said with a chuckle. "You're always so organized. We didn't think you'd mind just adjusting." I smiled. Tight, flat. The kind of smile that closes doors from the inside. Inside my head. I used to believe people when they called it a mix-up. Now I just label it what it is. A message. After dinner, I stood. No one noticed. I made my way past the crowd, around the tables, through the hallway near the bar. Richard stood by the windows, sipping what looked like bourbon and chatting with a man in a navy blazer. I waited until the man walked off. He turned when he saw me, didn't look surprised. "Everything all right?" he asked, casual. "That was the last time," I said, voice calm, steady. "That you speak about me like I don't know who I am." He shrugged, half grin like he was talking to an old coworker, not his daughter. "You walked out years ago," he said. "I'm just telling the truth." "No," I replied. "You're telling your truth. I'll stand in mine. But next time you rewrite history with me in the room, I'll correct it. In front of the room." He didn't answer. Not because he didn't want to, because he didn't expect me to finally draw the line. I walked back to my table. The room hadn't noticed. No one clapped. No one paused their drink. June slid a folded napkin toward me. Inside it, a scribbled note. "I saw it too. Proud of you." I didn't unfold it again, just slipped it into my purse. Across the room, Carla threw her head back laughing at something someone had said. They think this is the end of the story, I thought. It's not even the climax. I didn't leave. I didn't raise my voice. But I stayed. On my terms. The music had shifted to something looser, jazz fading into background hum. People wandered now, drinks in hand, carrying dessert plates and shallow gossip. I stood by the bar, not drinking, just standing, breathing. That's when he walked over. Older man, tan sport coat, expensive loafers. He didn't ask. He pointed. The table near the fountain still waiting on their drinks. I looked at him. For a second, I almost responded with habit, some reflex of compliance buried deep in the ribs. Then I said, calm and clear, "I'm not staff." He blinked, realized, blinked again. "Oh, you're dressed like them." That was all he said before walking off, no apology worth keeping. I didn't chase him down for one. I looked down at my navy dress, the flat shoes, the absence of my medals, of my name tag, of everything that made people squint when I walked into a room. I looked like someone who got things done and stayed out of the picture. For years, I thought, I kept this machine running behind the scenes, and that's exactly where they want me to stay. Unnamed. Unchallenging. I caught my reflection in the glass behind the bar. Muted, half-lit, forgettable by design. That was the uniform I wore tonight. And it worked. Carla laughed from across the room, one hand on Lucas's shoulder, the other motioning dramatically to a group of men I didn't recognize. Her body language screamed, "We've arrived." His posture said he still wasn't sure where. The staff walked by in dark gray. I looked just like them, not a mistake. By design. I took another lap around the edge of the room, too warm inside, too loud. Outside, the air had cooled slightly, and I slipped through the door near the exit sign. Light flickered above the valet station. Cars lined the circle drive like trophies. I wasn't out there for more than a minute when another man approached. Gray beard, pressed khakis, black Audi key in hand. "You the valet?" he said, not even looking up as he dropped the keys in my hand. I stared at him, then at the keys, still warm. "No," I said slowly. "But you just handed your car to a commanding officer in federal logistics." That got his attention. He looked up. Eyes widened. He stammered something, half a laugh, half a stumble of words. I handed the keys back to him without another word. Then I turned and walked away. It wasn't a mistake. It was conditioning. People see what they've been trained to see, and when someone doesn't fit, they recategorize until it makes sense to them, or until it makes them feel safe. I found a bench tucked behind the building, near a line of overgrown hydrangeas that hadn't been pruned since spring. Sat down. Let the sounds drift past me. Distant silverware. An occasional laugh. In that quiet, the flashbacks came without permission. My first medal had arrived in the mail. Brown envelope. No ceremony. No applause. I showed it to Richard. He looked at it, nodded, and asked what I wanted for dinner. I didn't ask for his pride after that. Never again. I looked up. A little girl spun in slow circles near the flower bed, her dress twirling around her like it had been made for the breeze. She couldn't have been older than 6. She looked free, and I thought, she won't be invisible unless someone teaches her to be. I took out my phone and texted June. "Tonight's theme. They mistake you long enough, you start playing along." A minute later, she replied, "Then it's time to stop playing." I stared at her message, read it 3 times. Then I stood, smoothed my dress, walked back inside with a spine that didn't curve. I moved through the crowd differently this time. I wasn't pretending anymore. Lucas caught my eye. This time, he didn't look away, didn't flinch, just held the look for what it was, recognition. Carla passed by me as I approached the hallway, her smile stretched too wide. The kind that said, "Still trying?" I nodded, didn't slow down. My silence wasn't passive anymore, it was armor. I was adjusting the strap on my shoe when I felt a light tug on my dress. I glanced down and saw a small boy, Eli, Lucas's nephew if I remembered right. He looked up at me like he was trying to solve a puzzle he'd only just found in his pocket. "Are you the lady who works for Grandpa?" he asked. I didn't flinch. I didn't smile with pity. I bent slightly and replied, soft and calm, "No, sweetie, but I've worked for a lot of people." He nodded, satisfied like children often are when they think they've got the answer close enough. Then he skipped away toward a group of cousins playing tag between the chairs. Children don't lie, I thought. They just repeat what they've heard. That's what someone must have told him, that I worked for Richard, that I was staff, that I was someone hired to help. Carla walked by just as Eli disappeared into the crowd. She didn't stop, just smiled tight, nodded, and moved on. But she heard it. I saw it in her eyes. A few minutes later, Carla passed by again. She paused near me, pointed toward a nearby table, and said lightly, "They're low on water pitchers. Would you mind helping since you're so used to the logistics?" Her tone was casual, polished, coated with that southern hospitality that makes an insult sound like a compliment. I didn't say a word. I looked her dead in the eye. My face said everything. Then I turned and walked away. From behind me, I heard a man murmur, "Wait, isn't she the woman from the Federal Contract Review panel?" He didn't say it loudly, but it was enough. The seed was planted. And seeds, if you let them breathe, grow fast. Across the room, Lucas had been watching. I didn't realize it until I turned and saw his eyes still on me. He didn't look away this time. He held his glass but didn't drink from it. His grip was too tight. Something was shifting in him. You could see it in the way he stood, less certain, less upright. Like he was remembering something he hadn't thought important until now. I watched his gaze move across the room, to Carla, to Richard, then back to me, and I knew exactly what he was thinking. He was replaying every document he'd ever signed, every boardroom meeting he'd been ushered into. Every time my name had come up as a side note, every email that CC'd me but never directly addressed me, he was putting it together. And then someone from the front called out, "Lucas, say something to the younger ones before we wrap up." It wasn't a request. He blinked, stiffened, then walked to the mic. I stayed where I was. He cleared his throat once, adjusted the mic like he wasn't sure if he'd speak into it or break it off. His voice cracked slightly, but then steadied. "Thank you all," he began. "It's been a night full of reflection." Pause. "And thank you to the people who keep things running, especially my superior, Aileen Grimes, who I've only just realized is in this room tonight." Silence. No movement. Just the buzz of lights and the drop of collective awareness. Carla dropped her napkin. Richard stopped chewing. The couple next to me slowly turned in my direction like they were trying to remember if they'd said something dumb earlier. I didn't move. I didn't blink. I raised my water glass. Sipped. That was it. June, 2 seats over, looked at me with something just below a smile. Her eyes held it in for me. I didn't need him to speak, I thought. But they needed to hear it, from someone wearing their crown. Carla laughed. Too sharp, too late. "Oh, formality and ranks always so serious," she said, waving her hand like she was trying to erase the moment mid-air. But no one laughed, because everyone felt it, that subtle shift when truth walks in and pretenders forget their lines. The room wasn't hers anymore. The room hadn't found its footing again. After Lucas spoke my name, it was like someone had knocked the wind out of every scripted conversation. People still stood, but the clinking of silverware had stopped. Carla rose, too quickly, and tapped her fork on the side of her glass. Her smile stretched further than it needed to. Too rehearsed, too bright. She cleared her throat. "Before we get too swept up," she said, "let's stay true to our story." There it was. The word, "our." The room shifted. Murmurs. A few people sat straighter. Richard didn't move. My hand stayed on the table. I didn't flinch. Carla pulled a manila envelope from her purse and handed it off to the AV assistant like she was passing over Holy Scripture. The assistant hesitated, then walked toward the booth. Inside my head, "Here it comes, the cleanup crew for the truth." The screen lit up again. A scanned document appeared. My name. A fake signature. A timestamp. "Months ago," Carla began, "Aileen graciously approved Lucas's leadership on this project. We just want clarity, so no one feels slighted." People nodded slowly, confused. My feet moved before I realized I'd stood. Walked toward the screen with a pace that felt like it belonged to someone who had rehearsed this moment 1,000 times. I hadn't. But I was ready anyway. They changed the hour, I thought, then claimed I missed the speech. Now they're doctoring paper. I remembered Carla texting me that the ceremony started at 7 p.m., but I'd arrived at 6:45, only to find they were already well into it. Someone else had spoken already, Lucas. They started at 6:30. I reached into my handbag, fingers brushing against leather and steel, the folder I brought just in case the evening didn't go according to script. I faced the room. "I didn't come here for applause," I said, voice steady. "But if truth is being served, let me contribute." I opened the folder. Held up a printed audit trail. This document, I held it toward the AV assistant, was edited using metadata linked to Carla Atwood's private email address. The signature line is copied from a scanned training form. My digital stamp is missing because it was never submitted through my office, and the approval was never logged in the system. June stood. I handed her the printed packet. She read aloud. The room didn't move. When she finished, I nodded once and stepped back. All eyes shifted to Richard. He didn't blink. He didn't smile. His jaw tightened, but not with anger. He looked at Carla like he'd just met her in a parking lot instead of a marriage. Carla took a half step forward. "This isn't necessary," she started. Richard raised his hand, and she stopped mid-sentence. He turned to me, walked 3 steps forward, pulled something from inside his coat, paper folded tight. Then he stopped, didn't hand it to me. Just held it, fingers shaking, like he was deciding whether to throw it out or swallow it whole. His voice came low, rough. "I had something to say. I don't know if it means anything now." He slipped the paper back into his coat and stepped aside. I looked at him. "That's okay," I said. "Some truths don't need to be spoken if they've already been lived." He didn't speak again. Carla sat back down, this time without a word. Her hands rested in her lap like they were waiting to be told what to do. Lucas still stood, his head lowered. The DJ, sensing something had shifted beyond music, played a soft jazz tune. It felt like trying to pour syrup on a fire. Guests moved slowly. Some walked toward me. No big gestures, just hands extended. Small nods. A squeeze of the shoulder. I didn't raise my voice, but I had finally raised my presence. I reached for my bag, nodded to June. She stood too. As I walked toward the exit, heels tapping gently across tile, the room didn't go back to normal. It adjusted. The sun cut through the blinds just right, landing across my lap as I sat in the sunroom. Coffee in hand, not hot enough to scald, just warm enough to comfort. I hadn't spoken to anyone since I walked out of the venue the night before. Not even June. My phone stayed on silent, but I kept it near. Habit, not hope. I reached for my purse. Tucked inside, still folded in half, was the note Richard hadn't handed me. He'd stopped himself, but somehow I still ended up with it. I opened it slowly like it might dissolve if I looked at it too fast. "I don't know how to say I'm sorry," it read, "but I think you deserved more than I gave." No sign-off. Just Dad. I sat there for a minute, letting it settle, letting it sting, but not pierce. It wasn't an apology. Not really. It was a confession of limitation. And somehow, that felt more honest than any full-throated sorry would have. I folded it again and placed it inside a book on the table, Leadership in Silence. Seemed like the right place for it. My inbox buzzed. A message from the event coordinator. "Just wanted to thank you for helping with logistics last night. You kept things running so smoothly." I didn't blink. I typed back, brief and clear. I was a guest, not staff. Then I closed the laptop. I stood and stretched. Let my eyes land on the photo hanging across the room. My team from the base in Colorado. 10 people, 3 continents worth of experience, uniforms starched, boots lined like respect itself. These were my people, I thought, the ones who never needed a bloodline to respect me. I picked up the wedding gift from the side table, the frame I had custom made, gold inlay, hand-carved, still in my possession. At the ceremony, they'd thanked Aunt Clara for it. I didn't say a word then. Now I just looked at it and placed it back in its box. Let them keep the performance. I had the truth. My phone buzzed again. A message from June. "Little Eli asked if you're coming back to the next family dinner." I smiled. The same way you smile when a child asks why the sky is blue. Honest curiosity. No malice. He'd once asked me, "Are you the helper lady?" And he hadn't been wrong. He just didn't know what he was repeating. He saw me standing, I thought, not serving. I replied to June. "Tell him I might, if there's a real seat for me this time." Then I opened my calendar and deleted the recurring reminder. Family dinner, every 3rd Sunday. Left the contact, erased the expectation. Back in my office, I straightened a few frames. The one of Mom and me at my officer pinning stayed where it was. But below it, I tacked something new. A replica of the wedding invite, the one where they spelled my name wrong. Grimy. I had marked it up in red pen, circling every error. Not to mock it, to remember. Next to it, I hung the nameplate from my first office, Aileen Grimes, founder. "They don't have to say my name," I whispered. "I already own it." Before heading out, I drafted a message to Lucas. "Lead well, but don't let people forget who helped build the road." No shade, no venom, just a roadmap. I dressed with intention, full uniform, 2 stars, polished pins, pressed lines. Today wasn't about family, it was about service, community. I was heading to a local veterans brunch, faces that knew what sacrifice felt like, where ranks mattered not for pride, but for purpose. As I stepped through the hall, someone called out from across the room, "Commander Grimes!" I turned, and this time, I smiled, fully, like I meant it.